Hi, everybody. I'm AJ Katsimatidis, and I am very excited to be here in Washington, D.C. with one of President Trump's favorite congressmen, Congressman Matt Gaetz, who represents Florida's 1st congressional district. And he also is known for having the best hair in Congress.
Well, the average age, I think, is like somewhere in the low 60s. So, you got to grade him on a curve.
Absolutely. And I mean, I would say the Republican Party, but I'm sorry, I think President Trump has you beat on the hair.
He's got the better coif. I will confess, as is usually the case.
So we're here because it's a very exciting time. You just released a new book called Firebrand.
That's right. I was so excited to write this book. I'm so grateful to everyone joining in to share in our discussion this evening. And I'm looking forward to signing some books for folks out there that are interested in my invitation to the next generation of America First MAGA ideas. I think there are a lot of folks in this town, AJ, who hope that President Trump is just an aberration, just a one-off, that when we're over this populist revolution, the Republican Party can go back to the Romneys and the Kasichs and the Cheneys and whatever Bush relative might be next. But I think we're part of a political realignment right now, where the Republican Party is actually going to put America and the American people first. No longer will we be the party that wants to invade everywhere and invite every illegal immigrant across our borders, and then impoverish every town USA with these trade deals that benefit multinational corporations at the expense of American workers. So in many ways, Firebrand is my invitation to the ideology and to the political realignment that President Trump has led, but it's also my confession about the corruptness of Washington, D.C., the way I played the system when I first got here, and my own path to becoming the only Republican in the United States Congress who does not take any PAC money from any federal PAC. And that's because I believe that true, energetic populist movements can be funded by the people who support them. And that ultimately is the way to vindicate the Trump agenda, is to make sure that when President Trump is gone, which I suspect will be 5 years from now, that there'll be a new ethic here, that we don't just hand over the reins of government to the lobbyists and the PACs, but we do right by the great folks who serve us here, to send us here to be part of the greatest body and the greatest country in the world.
Well, we love that you're promoting the whole America First agenda and this new direction that the party has really moved in, because you were elected to serve the American people by the American people. And so many politicians nowadays are not working to serve the American people. So thank you so much for standing up for that. And you believe that many of the problems that we're facing in this country to a certain extent are because people aren't really celebrating their American heritage. And I know that's one of the things that you really believe in.
Yeah, absolutely. I wrote a chapter called Uncanceled in the book about the way that the cancel culture has a real negative effect on Americanism. There are a lot of folks in politics today who want to make us think that we've got to be ashamed of our country, that this country is not precious, that it is not special, that it is intractably racist and doomed to failure. And while I recognize we always strive to be more perfect people and we have to strive to be a more perfect union, this is the greatest country that has ever existed. And I think that in policy decisions, there are some who take too low a view of what it means to be American. Like, on immigration, if you would just invite everyone across our border illegally with entitlements, if you think it's okay for big corporations to benefit off of low-cost labor, then I don't think you really get the value in America that we give to people anywhere on the income spectrum to be able to do better and achieve more. You could be born to greatness and achieve greatness that wasn't even contemplated. You could be born with nothing and do great things in America. And I also think that, like, these folks who think we can invade wherever a stand and just like turn it into the next flourishing democracy because we happen to be there, take too low of a view of what America is. I mean, we cannot export the specialness of this country. And that's why I wrote in my chapter, Ending Endless Wars, that our generation has grown weary of these types of conflicts, And I think that it is a patriotic thing to do to bring them to a close in a way that allows us to invest in our economy, our wages, and that doesn't spill the blood of America's bravest patriots in foreign lands.
Absolutely. And America is the greatest country in the world. And that's why so many people want to come here, and we've flourished so well. And if you want to get a copy of the book, make sure you go to premiercollectibles.com/firebrand. It's the one place that you can get your signed copy of the book. So make sure you visit that website. And speaking about foreign engagements, as you just mentioned, with respect to America, um, what is your foreign policy, and what is the Trump doctrine of foreign policy, and how are they similar?
Well, I think President Trump understands that a generation of leaders have let us down in foreign policy. And it has been a bipartisan letdown, whether it was Bush or Obama. I mean, gosh, President Trump is the first president in my lifetime not to start a new war. And when you look at the decisions we make to avoid war, not get into it, I think you really see that President Trump knows how to treat a bully. You know, when you've got a world bully like Soleimani or al-Baghdadi, the founder of ISIS, or when you think about the leader of Al-Qaeda on the Arabian Peninsula who claimed credit for the terrorist attack in my district in Pensacola, President Trump took no quarter, or gave them no quarter, I should say. He took them off the battlefield with missile strikes. Now, what Obama and Bush seem to think is that the way to deal with a bully is to move into their house for 20 years and try to realign their worldview. America is not the world's piggy bank, and we are not the world's police force. And in the Trump doctrine, we kill the terrorists and we come home. We don't move in with them. And I think also we have focus on the right challenges and the emerging challenges. For a political generation, Republicans and Democrats have been trying to build democracies out of sand and blood and Arab militias in the Middle East. And the reality is, I don't know that that region is a great deal better as a consequence of the U.S. involvement in the war in Iraq and the extended involvement in Afghanistan. I know there was a job to do there, but gosh, we've been trading the same villages back and forth for 19 years in Afghanistan. What President Trump understands is that the future is not going to be defined by some, sand-dwelling mullah. It's going to be defined by the competition between the United States and China. And so focusing on China's aggression, making our country more resilient against it, not allowing China to steal our ideas, our jobs, that I think is an enduring element of the Trump foreign policy, because we're actually starting to see some Republicans push back against the chimerica dream that we were sold by Henry Kissinger, which has turned out, in fact, to be a nightmare.
Absolutely. And obviously, China has become a hot topic with everything going on recently. And President Trump, from the beginning of his presidency, had really warned us about that. So, unfortunately, all of this stuff is coming to fruition, but it's great that we have leaders like you within the Republican Party to help stand up for America first and fight back against China. So you talked a little bit about bullying, and one of the most dangerous things going on right now is censorship. We have a level of freedom in this country that isn't protected anywhere else in the world. And this is a big reason why our government can't control us, like in places like China, where the government controls the propaganda. And freedom of speech is really under attack right now. The left is playing this game where they try and make Republicans think they should feel bad about their policies, so they walk them back. And one thing I love about you, and everybody loves about you, is that you unapologetically stand up for Republican values and our president. So how can we change this mentality and combat this bullying here at home when it comes to censorship?
The biggest bullies are the big tech companies. I wrote a chapter in the book called Big Tech Hates America, and I detailed how these tech oligarchs really believe that they ought to decide the elections, that they ought to decide what we see and how we think, so that they could control how we behave. And a lot of Americans, I think, need to wake up to the societal detriment that comes when we don't feel like we can speak freely and share ideas, where some, Twitter employee gets to determine whether something's true or not, whether some Google team is assembled to try to elevate negative content about our president, whether Facebook decides that, well, right-wing populism is just too engaging on our platform, so we have to go suppress that and to try to build up anti-American left-wing populism. And so I think that the prescription to that is to take a more active role in regulating big tech companies. And there are some kind of neo-libertarian Republicans who say, oh no, we just have to have total hands off. But that has resulted in these companies dominating things like search, Amazon dominating in the product space, and certainly Twitter and Facebook dominating in the social communication space. And I don't know that that's what's best for innovation. I don't know that it's best for engagement. And so I'm on the antitrust subcommittee on the Judiciary Committee. And so I use that experience to craft some specific ways that in President Trump's second term, we could actually use his appointments to the FCC, to the Federal Elections Commission, and we can bring the heat on these companies that are America last too often in their approach.
Absolutely. And as one of the younger leaders within the Republican Party, you have certainly been more active on social media. So you have personally fallen victim to the censorship going on social media by the big tech companies. And I'm looking at some of the questions from people who have bought books. By the way, premiercollectibles.com/firebrand if you want to buy one of the signed books that the congressman is signing right now. And one of the questions is from Sandy from North Arlington, New Jersey. And she wants to know, even though you're not my congressman, I have the utmost respect for you. I would love to know how the heck you deal with the garbage thrown at you constantly on Twitter. Anytime I stick up for you, the trolls attack. It's insanity. Keep fighting for all of us, even those not in your district.
But first of all, that is very heartwarming. But you know what? I don't mind feeding my trolls. They need to get fed every once in a while. And sometimes the negativity and the hate is just a consequence of doing something and doing something different. I'm tired of seeing far too many congressmen and people in public life who are so afraid of criticism or scrutiny or attacks that they spend all day kind of hiding under their desk and hoping nobody ever notices them. I'm here to get known. I'm here to ensure that the ideas that are here in this book, Firebrand, are able to spread around the country and to continue to fuel this fantastic America First MAGA movement that our transformational president has led. Now, I will also say I wrote a chapter in the book called Revenge Porn Chivalry. When Congresswoman Katie Hill was attacked by her ex, when he released a bunch of photos of her without wearing any clothes and doing some other pretty strange stuff, I was the only member of Congress that stood up for her. And I think that when, to the point that that was being made by the questioner, sometimes we have to recognize the humanity in all of us. And when someone's having a rough moment or a rough day or the victim of an unfair attack, it's okay to stand up for people that we don't agree with. We don't always just have to attack someone because they're down on the other side. And so I didn't know where like AOC and the squad and the sisterhood of the traveling pantsuit were to defend Katie Hill. They had their fingers in the wind, sort of testing the political movements of things. And I was there to defend her. And I think that when it comes to the online hate, it doesn't bother me at all. And frankly, I would be willing to maybe ensure that there's a little bit more work across the aisle to recognize that we're all human beings. We're all here to do a job. And, I think it's great to do it with passion and gusto and energy.
I think that's so great. And I've seen you on Twitter before standing up for members of the opposite party for personal reasons. And I think we need more of that in this country, and everyone would agree. So what are some of your friendships that you have with Democrats that we're going to learn about in your book?
So I write about my unique friendship with Representative Ro Khanna. Now, I am I was born in politics in the Tea Party movement. I'm a Southern boy from the Florida Panhandle. I got a bright red district. In my district, Democrats are like the Florida Panther. Like we've heard of them, but we've never actually seen one in the wild. Now, Ro Khanna represents Silicon Valley. He is co-chair of the Bernie Sanders campaign nationally, and he and I are able to get past our disagreements and start with the stuff that we agree on. If you just picked any two members of Congress, even people that you would think would be diametrically opposed, there's probably something we agree on. And what's terrible about this town is that it drives the division and the negativity, where no matter what the other side says, you just have to be against it because the other side said it. Ro Khanna's mentioned it as one of my fellow congressmen who has taken the pledge to not take any federal political action committee money. And he was one of the people that inspired me to make that decision. And, I told you my book's kind of a confession. I have catfished hundreds of thousands of dollars from PACs and special interests during my first term here and at the beginning of my second term. But when I saw people like Roe able to inspire regular Americans to give to them, even if those aren't the folks that I agree with, I took it as a challenge to say, you know what, there are regular people out there in the country who might appreciate that you're not having the $10,000, steak and scotch dinner with a lobbyist, but there might be folks that can give $10, $25, $100 who can help fuel our movement. And so Roe and I agree on campaign finance. We agree on foreign policy. And it's a special relationship that folks will learn about a little in Firebrand.
That's great. And I just wanted to shift gears really quick to get a fun story out of you. One of my favorite stories in the book happened to during your visit to Mar-a-Lago for our dear mutual friend Kimberly Guilfoyle's birthday party. And I was very excited to see that I made a cameo in your book in my skin tight white dress. So thank you for including me in that. But that was such a great day. What a fun party. We really went out with a bang before the entire country shut down. So I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about that night, how you ended up at the table with the first family, and why is Mar-a-Lago so special to you?
Well, I'll tell you, the book details a little bit about my social life as well. And when I was at Mar-a-Lago that evening with AJ here dominating on the dance floor, I was on a first date. And so I asked Kimberly Guilfoyle and Don Jr., hey, can you guys let me sit with you at the head table so I can try to impress this very special woman that I had just met? And what happened was she ended up around all these people that were way more interesting than me. She was seated next to Tucker Carlson. And then there was this like handsome billionaire who kept kind of hitting on her and talking to her. And right when I thought that I had like lost the gusto and the opportunity to make this a successful first date, President Trump walks in, as he will typically do to Mar-a-Lago parties, as you know, and he commands the floor, commands the room. He pointed me out and said, that's my favorite Congressman, Matt Gaetz. He fights super hard. And I'm just thinking, well, if this doesn't impress her, I don't know what will. So the billionaire that was hitting on her didn't make it to the hot tub later. And that scene is also described in the Mar-a-Lago book. But it's fun to talk about the ways that our politics can be fun and engaging, but we're also people that enjoy great experiences together. And the president likes joy and fun. I mean, AJ, I look at this left-wing movement right now, and it is just an utterly joyless movement, right? They're angry all the time and yelling and protesting and boycotting stuff. We want to invite people to a movement that is full and lovely and caring and inviting of all people. And I think if we radiate that joy like a true Firebrand would, that will be something that will draw more people in. And like, what would you rather go to? Like a dance party with us at Mar-a-Lago, or like some COVID protest, like there's some Black Lives Matter protest where they're trying to bring down the United States of America while spreading COVID to each other.
Absolutely. And people like you who bring fun to the Republican Party, and President Trump has really revitalized the Republican Party in that respect, and something that I'm very thankful of, and we definitely need more of. But that's
isn't it great that he's not like a stodgy politician? I write in the book about how in yesteryear, we used to think that every politician had to be had to have the perfect family, the perfect golden retriever, that they had to be perfectly curated. And with Trump, you get this authenticity, right? He's so visceral, he's so real. And what that does for folks like me is it paves the way to be real ourselves. Maybe in our politics, whether or not someone has a perfect personal life or a perfect marriage or has never gotten in trouble is less important than whether they will fight for us, or whether they will try to change this corrupt place in Washington, D.C. And we know how to change it. Just do what the people sent us here to do. Fulfill the promises we made on the campaign trail. But so you make one set of promises on the campaign trail, and then you make another set of promises when you have to buy your committee assignment, purchase your influence, dole money around so that you can get a leadership position. That happens too often in the United States Congress, and frankly, it's unworthy of the great country that we serve. So I am here for the excitement and the vibrance of the Trump presidency, and I just don't want to go back to the country club. I feel like we're the party of the hunting club now more than the country club.
That's awesome. And everyone is going to have to go to premiercollectibles.com/firebrand to get your book, because I think everybody is definitely going to want to read more about this hot tub story. So
Yeah.
thank
Oh,
you
yeah.
for
No.
teeing that up.
So I'll just give you the opening line to chapter 6, Mar-a-Lago Magic. There's nothing like kissing in a hot tub with a Secret Service perimeter. They're not there, but they're there, if you know what I mean. It's nice to know that you don't have TMZ hiding in the bushes or nest cams. So you can find out all about my exciting hot tub time by reading chapter 6 first.
That's awesome. And it's great that we have such a fun president. So could you share with us one of your funniest President Trump stories?
Well, gosh, uh, he he is always so engaging and so probing on every aspect of life. I guess one thing is describing the times and ways that President Trump would call me. The who really can impact this town are the folks the president talks to and listens to and gets advice from. And you see, in the Obama years, they always tried to keep that a really tight knit group. They wanted limited access to the president. That's not President Trump. He talks to people in entertainment, show business, politics, law, business, and he has this eclectic group of people that are kind of the input system to his decision-making process. So I talk about the ways that, he's called me when I've been on the airplane. And like, what are you supposed to do? Talk to the president on the airplane or tell me you're on an airplane? He's called me when I've been in nightclubs out dancing. He's even called me in the throes of passion, and yes, I answered. So, I think that the uniqueness and frequency of that relationship with the president is very fun. He also always asks me about my dating life. He's always like, oh, have you gone out with this person or asked this person out? So he's very happy that I found someone very special, and he always calls me to share his perspective on such things.
That's awesome. And I love this recurring theme of the dancing within the Republican Party.
Right.
Hopefully we can do more of this.
We got to stay fun, AJ. You bring the fun. How do we get the rest of the Republicans to bring the fun?
Well, we got to have more leadership like you within the Republican Party. And speaking of leadership, Kelly from Massachusetts wants to know if you have any aspirations for running for president.
I always think America works best when we have one president at a time. And I think that right now, we're solely focused on reelecting President Trump. There are a lot of people in the MAGA movement who I think fit the mold of a firebrand. You look at a Donald Trump Jr., you look at someone like the Florida governor, Ron DeSantis. These are great folks. And, if they wanted to be president, I think that they've got the skill set to do it, and I'd help them out. But certainly on the vision and shape of the party, I want to be involved for the next generation of great MAGA achievement.
That's awesome. And you're talking about all of the firebrand people that we have in the Republican Party now, and they are really using a very strong voice, one that has typically not been used within the Republican Party. We've had a lot of weakness within the Republican Party of people kowtowing, feeling like they can't stand up for our values, but you have taken a really strong stance against cancel culture. So how are politicians on the left allowed to hang out with terrorists and pedophiles while they try to cancel you for hanging out with people who said a few edgy things? And what is cancel culture? Why is this cancel culture so dangerous? And what can we do to fix it?
There are a lot of weird and interesting people who can do the exceptional things that society needs very well, but they can't do easy things well. And so oftentimes the strange and odd among us have strange and odd and sometimes even despicable views that they share. I write about how some of the people who've made some of the greatest contributions to humanity, we might deem total weirdos today and want to cancel them. And so I think we need to look to people in a way that highlights the greatest contributions they can make, that doesn't focus on the bad thing they said online or the impolitic thing that they tweeted or posted on Facebook. I think that takes too low a view of how we all have the capability to process and filter and contextualize the information that comes at them. And so I talk about folks in the book who have been the victims of cancel culture, oftentimes guilt by association. Oh, you went to a conference that someone else went to, and when they were somewhere else, they said something that was inappropriate. Well, how are you supposed to know that, right? But these are the types of smears, like you say, that the left tries to utilize against those of us on the right. And by the way, like, you're on the left, when they engage in these activities, it ain't no consequence coming for them. I mean, nobody canceled Joy Behar out for her blackface incident, right? But wherever there were Republicans that had those similar challenges, you saw them wiped off the airwaves and erased from the internet. And it is a real threat, right? Like, I mean, the digital identity of a person is almost melded with their real identity at this stage of life. And that sometimes is for better and sometimes is for worse, but it increases the penalty of being canceled for so many brilliant American minds.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of being canceled, the left is constantly trying to cancel President Trump, and he won't let that happen. With the impeachment earlier this year, I know as head of the Republican Party in New York City, we tried to protest Jerry Nadler and go after him. But what for you was some of the toughest moments during impeachment?
So when Adam Schiff went down in that bunker in the Capitol and started interviewing witnesses and then leaking their statements, they were starting to move the polling. For the entire Russia investigation, the country was overwhelmingly against impeachment. And I talk about the way that we preserve that advantage in the Russia investigation in the Russia hoax chapter. But when it came to Ukraine, they tried this new strategy of bringing everything behind closed doors. And so I think one of the more consequential moments of impeachment was when I had about 50 of my Republican colleagues join me and we stormed the SCIF. We went into that room and we were there to jailbreak the truth and get the witnesses and the testimony before the American people. And you know what, AJ? When we did that, the public got to see this was a house of cards. This was a perfect call. The president was rightly concerned about corruption in the Ukraine. He was rightly concerned that the former vice president's son could have potentially engaged in that corruption, and he wanted to make sure that the relationship would be better going forward. I can't think of a more appropriate thing for a president to do, looking out for our country and our people. And so I think that really during impeachment, we, Steve Bannon said we broke the fever when we went down there and had that event, and afterwards the public pressure mounted to the extent that Democrats had to hold open hearings that I think we then won.
Yeah, and you're right about that. President Trump had a great moment in the debate last night when he called out Hunter Biden for only having a job after his dad became vice president and all of the corruption stemming from there. So David from North Carolina wants to know, what do you think is the greatest challenge President Trump faces in the upcoming election?
Ooh, I think one of the real challenges we have is with the integrity of the vote right now. Actually, can I switch this pile with that pile of books for you? I want to make sure we get a bunch of these signed for everybody asking questions. And
yeah, I was going to say, make sure to go to premiercollectibles.com/firebrand if you want one of these wonderful signed books.
I haven't even signed one for my own mother yet. And here I am. I'm signing them so folks can get them right now and make sure that we get them out to you.
Constituency service.
That's right. That's right. So when it comes to this election, I think the media is obviously a major challenge the president has, but he kind of knows how to deal with them. The new problem is the indeterminate number of ballots out there. I'm sure you've been watching in Florida. Michael Bloomberg is out there trying to bribe felons to vote their particular way. In Pennsylvania, we found a bunch of Trump ballots that had essentially been thrown in the dumpster. And then in Minnesota, Project Veritas did this great guerrilla journalism where they exposed people out there creating ballots, voting ballots that the legitimate person that was intended to vote those ballots, they never existed, or they never touched the ballot, or they never signed it. It was all a fraud endeavor. I talk in the book about how important groups like Project Veritas are to expose this, but President Trump is going to win the election day vote. And what we have to ensure is that after that, you don't have so much chaos and confusion that they execute on a color revolution in the absence of a legitimate democratic mandate.
I think you're right. And President Trump is really ahead with everything going on. Joe Biden not supporting law and order. I think Americans want law and order. They don't want their neighborhoods to be burned down. And the only way they're going to win is by stealing the election. And I think that they know that. So we definitely need to watch out for that.
Well, and I think that these protests could be sort of the preparation for the street fight that they really want to have with the country when President Trump wins on election day. And they're saying, well, no, we can't certify President Trump as the winner, we have to go and rustle up some more ballots and count them in key swing states where, look, I think that this is going to be a close election in some of these states that President Trump needs to win. And if somebody fraudulently creates even 1,000 or 2,000 ballots, that could be catastrophic to our country.
Can we borrow some of your guns for New York State for election night? For when
Are you
President
allowed to
Trump,
have guns in New York
for
State?
when President Trump wins New York and the rioting starts?
Oh my gosh. I know that you're a New Yorker and a proud New Yorker, but we are so proud to have President Trump as a Florida man. And you spend a lot of time in Florida.
I was his home county chair and he left for you.
That's right. Well, there's something special about Florida as well. And I write about some of the interesting circumstances and characters in Florida politics that we deal with. Florida's a microcosm for the country. We got a little bit of everything. We got folks that are out there on swamp buggies. We got, folks down in South Florida that have a different life perspective than folks in Central Florida. So it's kind of fun to move around the state and feel like you get a little bit of all that America has to offer.
I mean, Florida is such a great state. I personally wish that I lived there right about now.
Hey, 1,100 people move to Florida every day, AJ. You could be one of them.
I could.
All of you could be one of them. That's right.
But, you do so much for Florida, and you've done such a great job in Congress that Ashley from Massachusetts wants to know that during your time in Congress, what is your proudest accomplishment and what was something that you have regretted during your time?
I think my proudest moment in Congress, was the questioning of Robert Mueller that exposed what a sham that entire impeachment process was. And it took a lot of time, effort, and preparation to, get 5 minutes down with somebody who had been built up, for years. Well, in this particular case, been built up for months by the media. His testimony was so consequential. Also, the questioning of Peter Strzok, someone who I believe was there to set up the president and to showcase the bias that the president had to face to the country was a really important thing for us to do. And I think that I had a pretty effective questioning of him as well. When it comes to congressional regrets, gosh, so my first year, I was on the Armed Services Committee, and they called what I thought was the final vote on the defense authorization bill in the committee. And I voted yes. And it was at about 3 a.m. And then I went and crashed in bed because I knew I had early interviews. And it turned out that was just the vote to have the vote. And so I missed the final vote of the National Defense Authorization Act my first year in my committee. It was a little bit of freshman woes for me, but only in Congress do you have the vote about voting before voting. And so it took me a little while to get used to some of those elements of this place, but honored to be able to actually cast that vote in the years that follow. But it took me just that first year to get it precise.
Well, you're doing a great job. And I love that you are building a wall over here with all of the books you're signing.
That's
PremierCollectibles.com/Firebrand. If you want to get one of your signed books, I got to hand you some more
if you will.
So that you can use your Twitter hand to sign some of these books. But speaking of Congress, you've been a very vocal supporter of our president, and we all appreciate what you do. Do you think members of Congress actually stand behind the president, or do they mostly say one thing on Fox News but vote a completely different way?
Well, there was a lot of quarter given to the anti-Trump Republicans in Congress when Paul Ryan was Speaker. Paul Ryan didn't like Trump. He was hoping that Trump would sort of, be a nuisance that went away over time. Now that we've got more unified Republican leadership, it is a very pro-Trump party in the Congress. The problem is people can be pro-Trump in their hearts, but they don't always go and take the actions that are necessary to fully vindicate the Trump agenda. We should be fighting harder for immigration reform. You talked about the wall I'm building with my books that I know folks can get at PremierCollectibles.com/Firebrand. But if we had done this right, we would have that whole wall built by now. But Paul Ryan continued to cut deals for things he wanted for K Street lobbyists. And, the cost was that we had to sort of pay for the wall as we went. Now, we got over 200 miles built. I think that's fantastic. But for us to really, I think, ensure that we protect our country the way liberal politicians want to protect their homes, we need to complete the wall, and we need people who will actually fight for those ideas in Congress, rather than saying build the wall in their campaign ad, and then when they come here, they're always willing to cut a deal.
Absolutely. And I think that's great that you're so tough on immigration, because we really need to be prouder as Americans of our country and really support the America First agenda. So,
but that's not to say we don't need immigration,
absolutely.
Right? I'm going to share a bit of personal news that I'm super excited about here for those who've hung on with us. Today, I found out that my son Nestor became an American citizen. He took his test today, got his certificate of naturalization. And I write about my son in the book, and it's something that, people want to criticize me for online, but it is the proudest thing that I have ever done. It is the best thing that I've ever done. This boy came over when he was 12 years old from Cuba. I was dating his sister at the time, and things didn't work out with her, but his mom died while she was in Cuba, only 10 days after he got here. And so he didn't really have a stable home environment. And so I've raised him, for about the last 7 years, one way or the other. And today, getting that citizenship, he told me he was rushing to go register to vote so he could vote for me, and talking about my special relationship with him, how it informs my views on a number of matters that our country faces, is a special part of the book, and one that I'll certainly cherish for quite some time.
Well, you have a beautiful heart, and that really speaks to your character about your son. And absolutely right. I come from a family of immigrants, but that's why I'm so patriotic, because America gave them the opportunity to succeed. And they're so proud to be Americans. And that's why I appreciate our country. So you're absolutely right about that. What I really wanted to know before we wrap up here is, what was really your favorite chapter to write in the book, and what specifically would you flag for your readers as a point of intrigue?
Goodness. Well, I really like the opening chapter of the book, Sex and Money. The things in Washington that distract people and that cause them to sell out. And look, I don't think there's anything wrong with sex or money. I think a bounty of both is to be enjoyed, but I don't think people should sell out their country for either. And so talking about the distractions of Washington, D.C., some specific examples of where I think people have gone the wrong way, I think it gets folks really warmed up for the rest of the book. That's got a good amount of policy, but also a good amount of fun. You were in the fun part. So, it's always good to have those moments where you can see how folks who are, you might see us on television, you might see us on social media, but the book gives a little insight into the lives we lead otherwise.
So are there any last thoughts that you want to give to the people buying your book, premiercollectibles.com/Firebrand, to get one of these fantastic signed copies of your book?
Well, I've enjoyed signing them. I've enjoyed writing the book. And I want to thank those brave patriots who are out there fighting for our country. I think it would be easy in America today to look at the way the media is so negative and the left is so angry and think, is America over? Are we past the greatest times in our nation? And I fervently believe that is not true. We are a great country, a great people. We ought to love each other more. And, I dedicated the book, AJ, to our country and to the firebrands everywhere who love and protect her. So whether you're someone who has served our country in law enforcement, in uniform, whether you share your patriotism online or with your neighbors, whether you encourage folks to get out there and vote, and I hope vote for our transformational president, you can be a firebrand in your own way. You can be a part of this movement, and it's one I want to invite people to. Let's keep the fire burning for another 4 years under President Trump and then beyond.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for doing this. It's an honor to be with such a great patriot. Now keep signing these books, because there's so many people buying them.
All right. Well, I'm excited. And thank you for being the inspiration of some of the fun in the book and for coming to chat with me about it.